What would you do if you found a child alone in the wild? Not a human child, not from your world, covered in bruises, eyes full of fear. Would you walk away, tell yourself it's not your problem, or would you reach out, knowing it might cost you everything? The jungle breathed with a life of its own. Each branch creaked like old bones. Each vine writhed like it had somewhere to be. Every gust of wind carried the scent of rot and thunder, of something ancient and unsatisfied. It was the kind of place that didn't just try to kill you, it tried to make you forget who you were before it did. Beneath a twisted, blackened root, a little girl lay still. Skin the color of moonlit lavender, smudged with dried blood and ash. Her name was Lyra. 8 Earth years old, alone, hungry, cut in more places than she could count. Her right ankle was swollen and bruised, her breathing shallow. She wasn't just hiding, she was vanishing. The last thing she remembered clearly was the crash. Metal screaming, people shouting in her native tongue. Flames and shadows and hands pushing her forward, telling her to run. Run now, don't look back. She did, but no one came after her. No one circled back. The wristband still blinked faintly. A tiny red pulse like a dying star. She knew what it meant. No signal, no rescue, no home. Above her, the sky was nothing but a smear of gray and green. The canopy let almost no light through. Only hints of movement and the suggestion of something massive slithering just beyond sight. She tried to cry, but the jungle punished noise. So she curled tighter into herself, hands around her knees, forehead against the cold root, trying to become smaller. Invisible. Forgotten. Time passed. It lost meaning in the shadows. Hunger scratched at her ribs. Her lips were dry. Her legs trembled as she forced herself to crawl forward, each breath a task. She tripped more than she walked, but something made her keep going. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the vague memory of a lullaby her mother used to hum when the stars were clear. Then came the sound. A roar, not like an animal. Worse. It was metal and fury, like a dying machine dragged across stone. Trees shook, leaves scattered like frightened birds. The jungle paused, and so did she. Lyra turned just as something broke through the trees. Taller than any beast she'd seen before, wrapped in black bone-like armor. 4 clawed legs slammed into the dirt. Its head twisted as it sniffed the air, rows of serrated teeth catching the dim light. Red eyes found her. She didn't scream, she couldn't. Her legs collapsed under her. Her heart hammered like it wanted to run without her. She clenched her fists and waited, one final thought flashing in her mind. So this is how it ends. But the creature didn't move forward. Something else stepped into the clearing. There was no growl, no hiss, no warning, just light. A blazing orange bolt struck the beast in its side. It screamed, a terrible, high-pitched screech that cracked through the branches and stumbled backward. Another blast followed, smoke, fire, and a shape, a man, 2 legs, heavy boots. Black armor scuffed and melted along the edges. A large weapon rested in his arms, still humming from the discharge. He moved slowly, with the kind of calm only earned by surviving the kind of places most people didn't walk out of. Lyra's eyes widened. She tried to crawl away, but her injured ankle sent a lance of pain up her side. She whimpered, arms trembling. The man saw her. He approached. She flinched, expecting pain, more fire, a boot, anything. But instead, he crouched, set his weapon on the ground, raised both hands, open palms, no sudden moves. He said something, words she didn't understand. A language too heavy, too deep, then silence. Lyra stared into his face. He didn't have horns, his skin wasn't scaled or silver. He looked soft, worn down, but not cruel. He reached out slowly. She shook her head, body tense. He waited. Minutes passed in stillness. Then, ever so slightly, she nodded. He picked her up, gently, like she was something fragile, precious, not something broken. She braced herself for pain, but his arms were warm, secure. And for the first time in what felt like years, her heart didn't try to escape her chest. The monster's body still smoked behind them. Nothing else in the jungle dared come close. They moved through the brush, her limp body cradled against his armor. She didn't know who he was, didn't know what he wanted, but something inside her, some ancient instinctive part, whispered a single word. Safe. They reached a clearing, where the roots split to reveal a shallow cave in the rock wall. He carried her inside, laid her gently on a bed of dry moss, and covered her with his cloak. She didn't sleep, not right away. She watched him clean the weapon, wash his hands, stir something in a dented metal pot over a fire. He never took his eyes off the jungle entrance. He never looked afraid. And when he finally sat beside her, close enough to share the warmth but far enough to respect her space, she found herself whispering a name. Lyra. He turned, surprised. She placed a hand on her chest. Lyra. He nodded once, touched his chest. Reed. She tried saying it. He smiled. Close enough. The fire crackled. Rain began to fall outside the cave. Not heavy yet, but steady, constant, like the jungle itself was settling for the night. She pulled the cloak tighter around her shoulders. Reed leaned back against the stone. He didn't speak, didn't push. He just stayed, present, real. And for the first time since the crash, Lyra let her eyes close without fear, chasing her into sleep. The jungle still growled beyond the cave. But tonight, she wasn't alone. How long does it take to trust someone? A day? A year? Or does it only take one moment, one quiet gesture, to make you believe someone won't leave you behind? The fire cracked softly in the back of the cave, the light flickering along the curved rock walls like it was afraid to disturb the silence. Outside, the jungle was a chorus of distant growls and wind-blown leaves. But here, in this narrow pocket of earth and warmth, time had stopped. Lyra stirred beneath the heavy cloak that smelled like smoke, metal, and something vaguely human, dust and oil, maybe sweat. Her eyes blinked open, slowly adjusting to the amber glow of the fire. The pain in her ankle was duller now, wrapped in something tight and clean. Her cuts had been washed. Her skin was dry. Someone had taken care of her. Reed. She spotted him a few steps away, his broad back turned toward her. He sat cross-legged in front of the flames, hunched slightly, both hands moving with careful rhythm. His armor lay beside him, scratched and scorched, its plating cracked in more than one place. The weapon he had used earlier rested against a rock within arm's reach, its barrel still dark with residue. He cleaned it with slow, practiced motions, dipping a cloth into a canteen and wiping along the joints like a ritual. He hadn't left, even after she fell asleep, even after she told him her name. He stayed. Lyra pulled the cloak tighter around her shoulders. Her belly growled. She hadn't eaten since the crash, and whatever strength she'd found to keep moving was long spent. She watched him in silence, unsure. Every instinct told her to stay still, stay quiet. But hunger spoke louder. Reed turned slightly, sensing her gaze. He didn't speak. He just looked at her, eyes dark but not cold, unreadable but not unkind. Then, slowly, he reached into one of the side pockets of his gear and pulled out a small silver packet. He tore it open and removed a dull brown cube. Without a word, he placed it on a flat rock near her and backed away. Lyra stared at it, The smell was strange. Salty, smoky, something preserved. Not sweet, not familiar. But food. She crawled forward, dragging her injured leg behind her, wincing with each movement. When she reached the cube, she hesitated. Looked at him again. He was watching. Not demanding, just waiting. She took the food and bit off a corner. It was dry, grainy, but it filled her mouth with something solid, something real. She chewed slowly, blinking back tears. Not from the taste, not from pain, but from the simple weight of it. He fed her, not with force, not as a prize, just because. Reed didn't comment. He turned back to the fire, stirring something in a small pot balanced over a coil of metal. A faint scent of broth wafted through the cave. After a few minutes, Lyra whispered, "Lyra." He turned his head. She tapped her chest again. "Lyra." He nodded, then tapped his own. "Reed," she tried. Reed. His mouth curved into the smallest smile. Close enough. She smiled back, lips chapped and trembling. Outside, something shifted in the jungle. A low growl rolled through the trees, distant but clear. Reed didn't flinch. He rose slowly, grabbing his weapon without noise. His eyes scanned the dark beyond the cave mouth. His feet made no sound against the stone. Lyra froze, her breath catching. She knew that sound. She'd heard it before. The smell of oil and rot came a moment later, thick and acidic. Reed crouched near the entrance, weapon raised. Then she saw it. A tall shape slipped between two trees. Thin limbs, skin like black armor soaked in ash. Red eyes gleaming. Its breath fogged the air as it sniffed toward them. Lyra pressed against the back wall of the cave, trying to disappear. The creature took another step. Reed fired. The sound was thunder in a bottle. The recoil kicked back against his shoulder. The blast hit the monster in the head, sending it sprawling into the underbrush without a scream. Smoke rose. The jungle went still. Reed didn't move right away. He walked to the creature, checked its body, then spat into the dirt. He dragged it into the brush and returned minutes later, silent as before. Lyra hadn't moved. When he sat beside her again, she was hugging her knees, shaking. He said something, words she didn't know, but his tone was calm, not soft, not loud, steady. She looked at him, eyes wide. Then slowly, her voice cracked out a sentence. "You smell like fire." He blinked, then let out a short, rough laugh. The first sound of joy she'd heard since the crash. She pointed at him again, grinning faintly. "Reed, fire monster." He raised an eyebrow, pretending to be offended. She giggled. He rolled his eyes, muttered something under his breath, but the smile didn't leave his face. Later that night, she leaned against him. Her head rested near his elbow, her body curled up like a small ember trying to stay warm, beside an old, reliable flame. The jungle didn't sleep, but she did. And this time, she dreamed of stars instead of monsters. Would you trust someone who didn't speak your language, but offered you food, warmth, and silence that didn't judge? Let us know in the comments. Have you ever walked into a place that felt like the dead were still whispering? Not with words, not with sound, but with the weight of what they left behind. If you stepped into that silence, would you keep walking? The storm came at dawn, not a soft one. The kind that made trees bend and animals vanish. The kind where the wind carried more than water, fear, scent, electric warning. Rain hammered through the jungle like claws scraping the earth's surface. Lyra woke before the thunder, and Reed was already moving. He packed with quiet precision, boots sliding into his gear, hands checking ammo and flares. No panic, no waste. Just the routine of someone who knew what followed this kind of storm. He said one word, storm. She didn't understand it, but she didn't have to. She could feel it in her bones. The way the ground trembled, the pressure in the air, the way the jungle didn't growl but held its breath. Reed bent down, arms open. Lyra climbed into his hold without question, wrapping her arms around his neck. His chest was warm through the armor, his heartbeat slow and constant. She closed her eyes and listened to it, even as thunder cracked above them like the sky was splitting. They left the fire behind. Mud clung to his boots with every step. Vines whipped their faces. Wind howled through the trees in a language only the storm could speak. Lyra saw shadows again, moving, following, watching. She whispered, "Monsters." Reed gripped his weapon tighter, still didn't speak. The rain hit harder, slashing across them like tiny blades. Her cloak soaked through. Her teeth chattered. He shifted her weight, pulling his own cloak over her head, shielding her body even as his shoulders took the brunt of the downpour. Then he stopped. Ahead stood a tree, twisted, wide, hollowed out through the center like nature had built a shelter inside its gut. He looked up, scanned the sky, then ducked inside. The hollow was dry, tight, but safe enough. He laid her down gently on a bed of exposed roots, lit a small lamp on his belt. Soft blue light glowed against the bark. He knelt at the opening, weapon in hand, listening. She watched him. He didn't move, didn't breathe too loudly, like stone carved into a man's shape. She had a question, one she'd buried since the crash. Why? Why help me? His eyes flicked to her. She asked again, softer this time. Why? Reed said one word, alone. It was heavy, not a complaint, not an excuse, a truth. Were you left, too? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. A branch snapped outside. Lyra froze. Something was close. Reed turned off the lamp, lifted his gun, held his breath. A wet, heavy snort came from outside the hollow. Something sniffed. Clicking sounds, claws brushing bark. Then a crash. A massive claw punched through the outer wall of the tree just inches from Lyra's face. She screamed. Reed fired once, twice. Light lit the hollow. The monster outside shrieked, a terrible sound that rattled her chest. The whole tree shook. She fell back. Reed caught her mid-fall, pulling her close with one hand while aiming with the other. The creature clawed again, ripping bark. Its head pushed in, jaws lined with blades, breath like ash and rot. Lyra's lungs locked. She couldn't scream anymore, couldn't think. Reed pulled the trigger. Click. Empty. The monster lunged, and she didn't think. Her arm rose on instinct. The band on her wrist burned hot. A surge of blue light exploded from her palm. It hit the creature's face like lightning. The monster flew backward through the trees, crashing into the wet undergrowth. Silence slammed into the forest behind it. Even the rain held its breath. Lyra stared at her hand. What was that? Reed stared too, eyes wide. Then he smiled. That, he said, was not normal. She shook her head, still panting. I didn't mean to. He placed a hand on her shoulder. You saved us. They sat in that hollow until the wind calmed. Later, they walked again. Slower now. The jungle, still soaked and shivering, opened to a cliffside wall. Reed spotted the narrow crack in the stone before she did. A cave. He studied the opening. Stepped inside. It was cold, but dry. No wind, no scent of rot. He lit the lamp again. Lyra followed him in, then stopped. White shapes caught the light. Bones, dozens, maybe more, some small, some not. Bits of armor, pieces of weapons. A cracked data pad blinked dimly in the dirt. Helmets with holes burned through them. Claw marks in the walls. Lyra stepped back. People died here. Reed knelt beside one skeleton, brushed dirt from its chest. His hand trembled. Soldiers. He picked up a badge. It crumbled in his fingers. Human. What happened? He didn't answer. Instead, he moved deeper, checked the air, the ceiling, the exits. Safe for now. He laid out supplies, a heating pack, a mat. No fire this time. Lyra sat down slowly, her eyes locked on the bones. Reed noticed, walked over, sat beside her. "They didn't have what we have," he said. She looked at him. "What's that? You?" She blinked. "I'm small. I'm not strong. You held back a beast with your skin. I didn't try. It just happened. Sometimes the strongest things do. When we're scared, or when we have someone to protect." Lyra thought for a while. "Do you think they were protecting someone?" Reed looked at the bones again. "Maybe, or maybe they were just trying to survive." She leaned against him. "Do you think we'll survive?" He looked toward the cave mouth where the rain still whispered. "Yes." "Because of me?" He shook his head. "Because of us." "Would you believe in something you didn't understand, just because it saved your life?" Let us know in the comments. What would you say if a child asked you where your scars came from? Would you lie, tell them stories of battles and glory? Or would you tell the truth, that sometimes pain doesn't come from wounds, but from memories that never healed? The storm outside had passed, but its ghost remained. Rainwater still dripped from the cave roof in slow, steady drops, echoing like a heartbeat that had no chest left to live in. Outside, the jungle groaned as soaked earth shifted beneath the weight of fallen branches and broken roots. Inside, silence wrapped the walls like a blanket. Reed sat by the mouth of the cave, one hand resting on his weapon, the other pressed against the cloth bandage over his shoulder. The hit from the last monster had gone deeper than he'd admitted. His breathing was slower now, less certain, his movements stiffer. Lyra stayed close. She hadn't said much since the blast of light came from her hand. She didn't understand it. He didn't either. But something had changed between them. She could feel it in the way he looked at her, not just with caution or curiosity anymore, but with something gentler, like he was trying to remember something he'd once lost. She crawled over and sat beside him. The silence stretched, but not uncomfortably. Then she spoke. "Do you have a daughter?" Reed didn't answer right away. His eyes stayed on the tree line beyond the cave. "Had," he said at last. Lyra blinked. "Where is she?" He took a breath through his nose, deep and rough. "Gone." She didn't ask more. She didn't need to. She knew what that word meant. They sat quietly for a while. The fireless warmth packs glowed faintly beside them, casting a low golden hue across the stone. Then she said, soft as mist, "I'm sorry." Reed looked down at her, surprised. "It's not your fault," she added quickly, "but I'm still sorry." His hand, large and calloused, reached over and rested gently on her back. "So am I." He didn't say more, but something in him unclenched. Later, when the rain began to tap again, Lyra noticed Reed wincing as he shifted. Blood had soaked through the side of his shirt. She pulled out a dry ration cube from her pocket and held it out. "You need food," she said. "So do you. Friends share." He looked at her like she had said something ancient and wise. "Friends?" She nodded firmly. "You carried me. You fed me. You stayed when I cried. You fought monsters. That's what friends do." Reed gave a low, almost disbelieving chuckle. "Been a long time since I had one." She smiled, proud. "Then now you have one again." Reed didn't argue. Instead, he leaned back and rested his head against the rock wall, eyes half-lidded. Lyra nestled beside him, her head on his arm. The quiet held them. Not empty, full. Like the sound of two broken things learning how to hold each other without shattering. Hours passed. The light shifted. Lyra stirred. She noticed a faint glow coming from the far end of the cave, tucked behind a pile of stone. Curious, she stood and walked toward it. It wasn't fire. It was something carved into the wall, a symbol, circular, sharp-edged, glowing the same blue as the mark on her wrist. She reached for it. The moment her fingers brushed the stone, her mark flared. A pulse ran through the cave. Machines long dead blinked to life. A nearby datapad hissed, static clearing just long enough to play a message. A voice, old, tired, recorded years ago. If you find this, the child is the key. The light is not a curse. It is our only hope. Lyra froze. Reed turned fast, gun in hand, then lowered it when he saw her. He walked over, looked at the message, then at her. Not cursed, she whispered. Reed nodded. Number, you're the answer. Her eyes shimmered. Not from tears, but something deeper. Outside, the wind shifted. Something was coming. But inside that cave, for the first time, Lyra didn't feel like an accident. She felt like something waiting to begin. Would you believe a child could carry what generations forgot? Would you be brave enough to follow her if she lit the way? Let us know in the comments. What would you do if the monsters returned? But this time you didn't want to run. What if your fear no longer controlled you, and the child you once protected became the shield standing in front of you? The cave hadn't changed. Its stones were still wet with the memory of rain. The old bones still whispered stories that would never be told. The datapad that had played the message hours ago now lay silent again, its weak glow fading to gray. But Lyra had changed. Something in her eyes. Something in the way she stood now, like her weight finally meant something. She had spent most of her life being smaller than the world around her. Now, she was learning she didn't have to be. Reed noticed it too. He didn't say anything, but he watched her differently now. Not like a child to be guarded, but like a comrade you'd turn your back to and trust they'd still be there when you looked again. She asked to train. He didn't ask why. He just handed her a small rod, light, metal, nothing sharp, and began showing her how to hold it, how to stand, how to balance her weight. She mimicked him in silence. He didn't go easy, but he didn't go too hard either, just enough for her to earn every movement. The next day, the jungle quieted too quickly. Birds didn't sing. The wind didn't blow. Even the distant creek that usually babbled down the rocks fell silent. Reed rose from his seat with the kind of tension only soldiers understood. "They're coming," he said. Lyra didn't ask who, she already knew. They packed fast. No fire, no light, only silence. Reed slung his weapon across his chest, checked the charge, loaded the final power cell. Lyra wrapped her wrist tight with cloth, her mark still glowing beneath. A faint pulse, steady now, controlled. They barely made it to the cave mouth when the sound reached them. A thump, then another. Heavy, measured, like something wearing the jungle as armor. Then a growl. Low, deep, echoing across the wet trees. Reed lifted his gun. Lyra stood beside him. The first one appeared in the clearing, taller than the rest they had seen. Horns curling back, chest armored with black plates that shimmered like oil. Its eyes were molten red, locked onto them. Behind it came two more. Smaller, faster. They didn't roar, they didn't snarl. They advanced. Reed fired. The shot struck true, searing into the lead creature's shoulder. It staggered, then howled and charged. The others followed. Reed fired again, one dropped. The second dodged and leapt onto the rocks near the entrance. Lyra didn't hesitate. She raised her hand. The cloth burned away as her mark exploded with light. A beam of blue energy slammed into the side of the attacker, flinging it into a tree with a crack like thunder. The trunk split. The creature didn't rise. Reed turned to her. "Nice shot." She nodded, breath shaky. The big one reached them. It crashed into the side of the cave, swinging a clawed arm at Reed. He fired once more, empty. It slammed into him, knocking him sideways into the wall. He didn't get up. Lyra screamed. The beast turned toward her. She raised her hand again, but the light flickered, faded. She stumbled back. It opened its mouth, teeth glistened. Then a shot rang out. Reed, from the floor, bleeding, one arm limp, but his other hand held his pistol, shaking. He fired again. The blast struck the creature between the eyes. It dropped, dead. Silence returned. Real silence. Lyra rushed to him. Blood trickled from his mouth, his side. "I'm good," he said. "Don't let anything hit me like that again." She laughed, but it broke into tears. She helped him sit up, wrapped his wound. His face was pale, but alive. They sat surrounded by bodies, and Lyra looked at her hand. "I thought I'd be scared," she whispered. "You were," he said, "but you fought anyway." She stared into the jungle, her heart still racing, her wrist still glowing. The monsters were dead, and she'd helped make it happen. Would you let a child stand beside you in battle? Not because you had no choice, but because she chose to fight. Let us know in the comments. If something inside you changed overnight, something strange, powerful, maybe dangerous, would you try to bury it or learn to make it yours? The days after the attack passed in fragments. Reed's wound had gone deep. His right arm stayed in a sling now, shoulder wrapped in layers of old fabric soaked with herbal paste Lyra had gathered from the jungle roots. He slept often, but not well. When he did, his face twisted like he was watching memories fight each other. Lyra stayed by him. She barely left the cave. Her wrist still pulsed with soft light, steady now, not like the bursts of chaos before. It felt warm under her skin like a second heartbeat, humming when she thought too hard or felt too much. She didn't fully understand what she was yet, but she knew she couldn't run from it anymore. One night, after Reed drifted off into shallow sleep, she walked to the far edge of the cave. The symbol was still there, etched into the stone, glowing faint blue. She pressed her palm against it again. Nothing exploded this time. No pulses, no voice, but she felt connection. Not to the cave, not to the mark, to herself. She stood taller after that. Later, when the morning fog curled in low outside the cave and the air smelled like fresh rain and moss, Reed woke to find Lyra standing near the fireless heater, her arms outstretched, eyes closed. "What are you doing?" She opened her eyes slowly, practicing. "With what?" "This," she said, lifting her wrist. Reed pushed himself up with his good arm. "You're not afraid anymore." "I still am," she admitted. "But now I think the mark listens to me." He raised an eyebrow. "Listens. Like it feels what I feel, like it doesn't act until I do." "That's not how weapons work." "Maybe it's not a weapon." Reed studied her for a long moment. "You know, sometimes soldiers don't get to choose what their hands were built to hold, but you still can." She looked down at her palms. "I don't want to hurt people." "Then don't," he said simply. "Use it to protect." That night she sat beside him as he winced through the process of changing his bandages. His skin was healing slower than it should. Too much blood lost. Too many battles behind him. His breath rattled more than it used to. She touched his forehead. Hot. She looked at her wrist. It glowed. She placed her hand gently on his shoulder. Nothing happened at first. Then warmth. Subtle. But he sighed. Less pain, more breath. He looked at her with a strange expression, like something between disbelief and wonder. "Did you just—" "I don't know," she whispered. "I just wanted you to stop hurting." Reed didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached out, covered her hand with his. "I think you were never meant to fight monsters," she blinked. "I wasn't. Number you were meant to make them stop fighting." For a moment she didn't know what to say. She simply leaned into him. Outside, the jungle seemed to pause, as if listening. Later, Reed taught her how to control her breathing when fear tried to squeeze her lungs. She taught him the song her mother used to hum on cold nights, the one about stars that danced when no one watched. Together, they practiced. She learned to summon the light gently, not as a weapon, but as a guide. He learned to let someone care for him. The jungle didn't attack again, but they both knew it would. Peace never lasted in a place like this. But in those quiet days, in the pause between storms, something else took root. Not safety, not escape, but understanding. Would you let go of the fear that made you survive to become the person who might help others do more than survive? If you knew the enemy was coming and there was nowhere left to run, would you face them even if you were outnumbered, even if you were just a child and a broken soldier, or would you stand anyway because running was no longer who you were? The air shifted that morning. It wasn't just the clouds. The jungle went still, not quiet, still, like everything alive had flattened itself against the earth, bracing for what was about to come. The birds didn't return. The vines stopped moving. Even the wind felt like it was hiding. Lyra stood just beyond the cave mouth, her bare feet on damp moss, the mark on her wrist glowing like a second sunrise. Behind her, Reed leaned against the stone wall, his arm still in a sling, a sidearm strapped to his chest. His face was pale, but his eyes were clear. He knew what this meant. So did she. They were out of time. Far in the distance, a sound rumbled through the trees, low, mechanical, unmistakable. Engines, not beasts, ships. Lyra ran to the cliff's edge and saw them. Two crafts cutting through the sky like silver knives. One marked with blue signal beacons. Reed stepped beside her. His breath caught, not from the pain, but from the sudden weight of hope. Rescue. But Lyra didn't smile. Her eyes stayed locked on the tree line. They're here too. She didn't say who, he didn't ask. They both knew. A growl rolled over the hill, then another, then dozens. A chorus of hunger and hatred, a sound that crawled under the skin. She stepped forward, her wrist flared brighter. Reed pulled his gun free, checked the charge, ignored the sting in his ribs. "No running," she said. He shook his head. "No hiding." "This is it," she whispered. "We finish it." The first beast burst from the trees, a shadow with teeth. Reed fired. It dropped midair. But behind it came more, 5, 10, 15. They rushed the clearing, tearing through branches like they weren't even there. Lyra lifted both hands. The blue light poured from her like a rising tide. Not wild this time, not afraid, focused, controlled. It wrapped around her like armor, spread through the ground like roots. One beast tried to flank them. Reed spun, fired. Its body crumpled. Another leapt from a rock. Lyra turned, hand outstretched. The blast hit it in the chest, flinging it backward into a tree that split under the impact. The jungle trembled. The ground shook beneath their feet. But they didn't step back. Another wave came. Claws, screams, eyes glowing with rage. Reed's ammo ran low. Lyra's knees wobbled. One of the larger monsters barreled forward. Reed pulled his knife, swung hard, slashed deep, but it hit him across the chest, knocking him to his knees. Lyra screamed. The light from her wrist exploded outward, a wave that bent the air. The creatures stumbled. One ran, the others slowed, then stopped. They weren't charging anymore. They were staring. And for the first time, Lyra saw it. Fear. The monsters weren't hunting now, they were doubting. A moment later, the sky cracked open as the ships descended. Dust swirled, trees shook. The roar of thrusters silenced even the growls. Doors opened, figures emerged, soldiers in armor, human and alien alike, weapons raised, scanning. They saw the bodies, they saw the child and the broken man still standing, and they understood. One of the creatures lingered, the largest. It locked eyes with Lyra. She stepped toward it. The light in her hand didn't burn, it glowed, steady, ready. She raised her voice, not loud but clear. "Go." The creature hesitated, then turned, and vanished into the trees. The battle was over. Medics rushed forward. Lyra held up a hand. She walked back to Reed, helped him stand, then turned to the rescuers. "We're okay," she said, "but we're not the same. Would you face the monsters of your past? Not to destroy them, but to prove you're not afraid anymore? What if survival wasn't the end of the story? What if walking away from the jungle wasn't a finish line, but a first step into something no map could show you? Would you carry the past, or walk forward with someone who helped you change it?" The ship rose slowly through the canopy, the clearing shrinking below until it became a dark wound in the green, half healed by smoke and morning light. The engines whispered now, softer than expected. Like even the machines didn't want to disturb the silence left behind. Inside the medical bay, Lyra sat beside Reed. He was pale, his shoulder bandaged tight, a medic checking vitals every few minutes. But he was awake, breathing, watching her more than the ceiling. She hadn't spoken much since the ship arrived. Everything felt too loud, too fast, too clean. She looked down at her wrist. The mark still glowed. But it didn't burn anymore. It felt like breath, like memory, like something she'd grown into instead of something forced on her. Reed shifted beside her. "You okay?" She nodded, then shook her head. He smiled gently. "That's fair." She dug into her pocket and pulled out a small ration cube. "I saved this." He raised an eyebrow. "For you." He shook his head. "You need it more." She held it out anyway. Friends share. He took it, slow and deliberate. Then he looked at her. Really looked. "You're not just a survivor anymore." "I don't want to be. What do you want?" She paused. "I don't know where I'll go now." "Then don't go alone." She leaned her head against his arm. "Okay, friend." A quiet passed between them. Not empty, just full of things words didn't need to say. The ship banked slightly, the clouds parting to show the curve of the horizon. The jungle, from up here, looked peaceful, as if it hadn't tried to eat them, as if monsters hadn't hunted every step, as if two souls hadn't stood their ground and changed something deep and quiet. Later, when the sun dipped low and the cabin lights dimmed, Lyra wandered to the viewing deck. Alone. She stood in front of the glass watching the stars blink awake, one by one. She didn't hear Reed approach until he spoke. "You still thinking about what happened?" "Always. Me too." They stood together. Then she asked, soft as breath, "Do you think I was made for this?" He didn't answer right away. "I think you were made to survive it. That's different." She nodded slowly. "Then what now?" He shrugged. "Whatever we make of it." She turned to him. "Do you still carry your daughter?" His eyes didn't leave the stars. "Every day. Does it hurt?" He nodded. "Do I help?" He looked at her. The corners of his mouth tugged upward. "More than you know." They didn't say anything else. There was nothing more to add. When they landed, the officials asked questions, names, dates, logs. They wanted reports, charts, classifications. But none of those things captured what really happened. No document could explain why the child with the glowing wrist stood between monsters and a man too broken to run anymore. No file could measure the moment a girl stopped hiding and became the thing the jungle feared. They were offered separation, different quarters, different recovery plans. They declined. "Wherever he goes," she said, "I go." Reed didn't argue, because wherever she went, he had already decided to follow. At the edge of the hangar, as they stepped into the new light, someone whispered a word behind them. Miracle. Lyra didn't hear it, but Reed did. And for once he didn't scoff, because maybe, just maybe, they were. Would you walk back into the world changed, scarred, glowing from within, and still choose to believe you belonged in it? Let us know in the comments.